I'm Mark Golub, and I'm coming to you now from one of the most wonderful places in the greater metropolitan New York area, the Neuberger Museum of Art of Purchase College, where there is an extraordinary exhibit right now available for you to see. It's called The Compromised Land. It is photography and video having to do with the state of Israel as it is today in all of its complexities. And what a joy, I'm standing right now with Helen Stambler Neuberger, who's the chair of the board of the Neuberger Museum of Art here at Purchase College. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for having us.
Thank you, and I would like to welcome Shalom TV and your viewers to the Neuberger Museum of Art. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you, it's so kind of you. Just tell me a little bit, for our viewers, what is this museum, how did it come to be, and what is its goal?
The Neuberger Museum of Art opened in 1974 here on the campus of Purchase College, SUNY. And the story started 50 years before that when our founding patron, Roy Neuberger, went to Paris in his 20s to find himself to look at art and to play a little. While he was there, he read the story of Vincent van Gogh, who at his death was a complete commercial failure. And it broke Roy's heart, and he found his life's mission. He decided he was going to go back to America. He was going to support emerging young American artists and make enough money to do so, which he did on Wall Street. And he began to collect art in the late 30s. In the late 30s, he was collecting the art of his time and artists who expanded the ideas then. And they became icons of modern art today, which we have here in the museum. Jack Levine, Rothko, Calder, Romare Bearden, and there were an enormous number of women and minorities in his collection of world-class art.
And I'm sorry, when did the museum itself open?
The museum, the Neuberger Museum of Art, opened in 1974 after Governor Rockefeller asked Roy to donate a significant portion of his art to the museum. He wanted to make Purchase College the arts campus in the SUNY system that he was setting up, and indeed he did. And this has a performing arts and the Neuberger Museum as the anchors of a great liberal arts college.
Oh, that's fabulous. Now, I just want to place you for our audience. Yes. You're married to?
I'm married to Roy's son, Jim.
Okay, and you've been involved with this museum virtually from the moment you got married. You have been here. Okay.
Yes.
So you've seen an evolution as well.
I have.
Okay.
I have.
So, Helen, explain to us, how does the compromised land both come here? What was the genesis of the idea? And how do you feel it reflects, really, again, the vision of this museum since its founding?
It was Roy's genius that propels us to carry on his mission in the museum today. We care passionately about supporting artists globally who are expanding the ideas of our time. We care passionately about educating future generations and ourselves with great scholarship. We care passionately about having provocative discussions about art and ideas. The Compromised Land is a wonderful and complex exhibition that has a wide embrace of artists asking questions about their world through their art. And at the Neuberger, we are thrilled to have originated that collection.
It's very exciting, Helen. But with the title itself is provocative. It's The Compromised Land. And I was wondering, first of all, who was the one who decided that should be the title of this exhibit?
I think you should ask the genius of Helene Posner to answer that question.
In one moment, I get this great pleasure of really walking through this exhibit for you and with you. And what Helen and Helene, who is the major curator here, and she was one of the two people who put this entire exhibit together, I said to Helene, if somebody came in here and wanted to see every still and about 2/3 of this exhibition, consists of videos, and you want to see every video, how long would it take? And Helene and Helen told me about 3 hours. We're going to give you sort of like the highlights. I'm hoping many of you want to come back and really spend 2 to 3 hours. What Ruth and I, my wife Ruth is with me, and Sloan is here, Oleg is here. We have already been blown away by what we've seen. So I'm hoping many of you get a chance to see it. And again, that's why I am so grateful, by the way, that you permitted us to come. But one of the things we'll talk about with Helene Posner, who is one of the major curators here of this exhibit, is how did she choose what she chose? And I am very curious to hear from her why they called it the compromised land, which obviously has a bit of a sting to it for people who are very committed to the state of Israel. So we'll see what she has to say. It's been an honor meeting you. Again, thank you for having us here. And I hope there are other occasions we get to be together.
Yes, we want you back soon.
Helen Stambler Neuberger. So now I'm standing with Helene Posner, who in a large measure is the one who put this entire thing together. Do you have a Jewish background yourself?
Yes, I'm Jewish.
Okay. Helene, is there a political perspective being expressed here? Is there in some way, when you create an exhibit called The Compromised Land, there seems to be some kind of agenda here, some kind of editorial comment. Is there any message you believe this exhibit makes, is a statement being made about Israel, and is there, to your mind, some kind of political statement that comes out of your exhibit?
Broadly, I would say yes. The answer to that question is yes. There is a political and social aspect to this show. We called it The Compromised Land. That's a very clear choice. It's a play on the Promised Land. And the show deals with the fact that Israel was founded on the utopian idea, the utopian Zionist state, the homeland for the Israelis. And it deals with a sense of disillusionment or existential threat that has happened over the past 60 years or so, what it means to begin a country with high ideals of democracy and homeland, and to live under threat, struggle, conflict for almost all of that time in one form or another, and how that wears on the psyche of its people.
To what extent, by the way, when you were there, or the extent to which you speak to Israelis today, do you think there still is an idealism in Israel despite the existential threat they live under? And also, it's a complex society. In many ways, we take for granted how complex America is. Every society is complex. Right. Israel has complexities. They've also done extraordinary, remarkable things, integrating populations from all over the world and dealing with a hostile population next to it and trying to treat its Arab citizens with as much sense of equality and compassion as possible. To what extent do you talk to Israelis today who would say, yeah, of course it was an idealistic foundation, and in some way the idealism continues?
I think it does, and I think the other notion that you mentioned, which I think is extremely important, is the complexity of the situation. So once you have a complex situation, it's not all one thing or another. And part of what we try to do in this show is to show a broad selection of work. We have 3 themes that are our organizing principles for the show. They are conflict and coexistence, which we've been alluding to, history and memory, and settlers in the land, because we felt that kind of encapsulated some of the important issues that are going on in Israel today, and that is reflected in the work of these artists. These artists are very well-informed, well-educated, but they're bringing a personal perspective. They are not simply sending a political message. They're talking about their own experience and their own stories. And I think part of what's so compelling for the show for a lot of people is listening to all those different stories and hearing all those different voices. And to be conscious of the fact that Israel is a multicultural democracy, that my understanding is 75% of the country is Jewish, but 25% is Arab, and 5% or so are other groups, and that's reflected in the work here too. The work behind us, for example, are images of Bedouin Arabs taken by a Jewish photographer, Mickey Kratzman, and they're wonderfully stunning portraits of people with real dignity and spirit who are quite marginalized group, but he's captured their humanity, and that's an important part to me, that this show captures people's humanity.
That's lovely. So I have to tell you, I am fascinated that you begin with a video on the floor. Explain it to us.
This is a work by an artist named Sigalit Landau. It's called Ascalon, and as you can see, it's a video projection on the floor of the gallery space. And we are watching 3 young men play a knife game. The piece is called Ascalon, and these are young men that live on the border between Israel and the Gaza Strip. And they are playing this game where they are using knives to try to overtake one another's territory. It's a game with rules. I don't know what all the rules are, but you can see it has something of an aggressive quality because they are using knives and not sticks.
Are these Jews or Palestinians from Gaza?
These are Jews.
Interesting.
Apparently Palestinians play the same game on the other side of the border.
Fascinating. Okay, what's next?
What's next behind us are some photographs by an artist named Mickey Kratzman. As I mentioned before, we try to include a multicultural perspective in this show, and these photographs by Mickey Kratzman are of Bedouin Arabs. So there are 2 parts to this series called Displaced. One are these series of makeshift homes. Obviously, they're Arabs, they're nomads. They set up these villages, which are called unrecognized villages, because the Israelis don't want these villages to exist, not out of any kind of cruelty, but because they have no services. They have no water, they have no sewerage. They're not safe, so they will regularly come along and mow down these villages. So I think that Mickey Kratzman has really preserved their dignity in these photographs. The video behind me is a work by Mickey Kratzman, whose photographs we've just seen, and Boaz Arad. And as I mentioned, we try to reflect different points of view in this show. The video is very simple. It's just a camera photographing these people, which look like a stream of humanity. There's no sound. And what the artists have done is set up a camera at one of the checkpoints between Israel and the Gaza Strip. So this is the checkpoint through which these Palestinian men have to travel to come and do a day's work in Israel. The video we're looking at now is by an artist named Michael Rovner, and it's called To Be a Human Being. She created this video under the auspices of Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Israel. And what she did was interview about 10 elderly Jewish women who are living in Jerusalem now, who had been in concentration camps when they were girls or young women. And it's very beautiful, poetic, impressionistic, and they're telling their stories. And it's not about bearing witness, it's sort of the show us style of presentation. It's more about how does anyone survive extreme adversity. And the things they talk about are the sense of camaraderie they had with one another, trying to envision the things that they lost that make them human, like their homes and their beds. They talk about art, and they created poetry and drawings and the power of art, again, to reinforce their sense of humanity and to heal, and also a sense of defiance that they feel as young women. We will survive this. We will live to tell about it. And you see the images of the women, you hear their narrative, and then you see a landscape, a forest, an auditorium, and so forth. And it's wonderful to watch. It's very powerful and very moving because, like so many of the works in this show, it has a very specific historical content, in this case the Holocaust, but it also is dealing with universal issues of how does one preserve one's humanity under extreme circumstances. We've set up 3 video viewing rooms, one for each of the 3 themes that I talked about earlier. The room we're in right now is the room dedicated to conflict and coexistence. And the video on the screen at the moment is by an artist named Nira Pereg, and it's called A Sabbath. And what we're looking at, this is again a more documentary style, is we are in an ultra-Orthodox neighborhood in Jerusalem, and the Orthodox people are setting up a barrier or barricade around their city on Friday night at the beginning of the Sabbath. and they put the barricades up. They stay up for 24 hours, and they are, in a sense, creating a sacred zone, a place of worship. No one can travel or work during that period of time, and separating it from the secular life of Jerusalem all around them. We're now in the room that's dedicated to the theme of settlers and the land. And we have two wonderful videos by an artist named Oded Hirsch. This one is called Tochka. And what Oded does is he sets up scenarios. He hires actors and sets up scenarios. And in this particular one, we have a group of men who are building a bridge. They're working together to build a bridge over what we will soon see is a very tiny little stream. So in essence, the bridge is basically useless. There's no need to build the bridge. But what he emphasizes in his work is the sense of a communal spirit, the kibbutz idea of working closely together. And the fact of working together in itself has value to the people who are doing it. So even though the bridge may have no purpose, the sense of collaboration and community has enormous value. Again, we're in the room dedicated to conflict and coexistence, and we have two videos from a trilogy of work done by a Palestinian artist named Dor Guez. The one we're looking at now is called July 13th. And he has adopted a documentary style. And what he's done is interview his grandfather Jacob, who we are seeing on this video right now, as well as his cousin Samira. Dor Guez's family are Palestinian Christians, so they are a minority within the country's minority. And Jacob, his grandfather, is telling the story of July 13th, 1948, when the state was being established and the Palestinian community was forced to leave their homes. He tells it. It's obviously a very dramatic story. The town was emptied out. His family took refuge in the local monastery where they stayed hidden for about 4 years. And he talks without any rancor. He's very calm, very thoughtful. I often say it's like hearing a story told to you by your grandfather. They have become assimilated people. They speak Hebrew. The kids went to schools with Jewish kids. So they are Israelis at this point, Israeli citizens, but they are Palestinians by ethnic background.
So you're pointing out here, this is a video in which people who come in here get to see how Palestinians, who during a very, again, complex period when the State of Israel was coming into being, and you do know there was a war that Israel was fighting at that time, but ultimately, despite that, you have here people who are living in Israel. It looks like he lives in a nice home, does he?
Yes.
Yeah. And in some sense, he has become certainly part of Israeli mainstream society.
That's very much the case. This is a family who decided to stay. We're looking at 3 generations of this family. They have become citizens of Israel. They are part of this larger country. We're now in the room devoted to the concept of history and memory. The videos take many forms. Some are straight documentary, others are narrative reenactments telling a story, others are staged, as the one we're looking at now, by the artist Boaz Arad. He is telling a story that's a personal story but also reflects the history of Israel. He is talking about himself, his father, and his grandfather. At one point, he takes out a gun that was his grandfather's, passed on to his father, who was in the security services, as was Boaz. He is an artist and an art professor, and in the course of this video, he makes a mask of himself, and he dresses himself up both as Itzhak Rabin and Yigal Amir. And he reenacts the assassination of Itzhak Rabin, playing both parts. He does this in a very schematic way. It's not as if we're convinced that this is actually happening. But what he's talking about is how his personal history and his family's history is intertwined with the history of Israel, and a certain failure on his part and on the security forces to protect Yitzhak Rabin, which he feels he bears some responsibility, or his family bears some responsibility for. This is an amazing video by the artist Yael Bartana. It's called Mary 'Cause Mary, or Nightmares. And this is probably one of the most sophisticated works in the show, in which she has created something that she calls the Jewish Renaissance movement in Poland. And we see a young man. Be interesting to listen for just a moment. This fellow, who is a Polish intellectual and activist, marches into a stadium in Warsaw, a rundown stadium, and gives this rhetorical speech, which sounds very much like a Nazi propaganda film, and is done in that visual style. And he is calling for the 3,300,000 Jews to return to Poland to help heal the 40 million Poles who are still there, and to work together to form a multicultural society. The artist is pushing us to think outside of the envelope, where in fact this may never could happen or should happen. She's asking us to think beyond the nationalisms that led to World War II, and to think of Europe in a more broadly based way, where people can cooperate beyond national borders. She's also asking us to think about what it means for oppressed and displaced people, as the Jews were in Poland in World War II, to go to Israel and then to displace the people who were already living there, the Palestinians. So there are many layers of politics in this work.
Basically, Poland was never a home to the Jews, and ultimately the Holocaust was a culmination of a long history of pogroms and oppressions and just the way in which Jews were not allowed to be human beings in the I don't know who this gentleman is. Is this a real person or an actor?
This is a real person.
Okay. So again, maybe he's driven by a certain sense of collective guilt of what his people did to the Jews. But it's not about an American perspective. It's a Jewish perspective. You talk to Jews who are in Poland, they even may have warm feelings about their own lives there and homes there. No one felt like Poland was their home, though. And for this guy to say, Jews, come back, we made a mistake by letting you go, it's just amazing to me. By the way, it's a fascinating video. I hope everybody who comes to this museum here at the Neuberger will come and watch it. But I'm just saying to you, I wanted to know what your reaction was, because as I'm watching it, I'm saying to myself, this is just he's from Mars, this guy.
The video we're looking at right now is by an artist named Danny Gall, and it's called Night and Fog. And this one is unique in the show. He has created a narrative reenactment. It's about 20 minutes long, and it's like a short film. What it's about is about Adolf Eichmann. The artist, Danny Gall, interviewed a man named Michael Goldman, who was an Israeli soldier who in 1962 was responsible for overseeing Eichmann's cremation and the disposal of his ashes. So in 1962, he was sentenced to be hung. He was killed. His ashes were cremated, and you see the cremation scene. You see the soldiers meet with the priest. I'm not sure where we are in the video right now, and they travel together, and they take the ashes on a boat, and they bury him at sea, because the feeling was that they didn't want there to be a memorial created to a Nazi war criminal. And so it is their job, and a very solemn task, for them to bury the ashes at sea.
Why does this move you?
Well, it brings back a very painful history, of course, the history of the Holocaust, but I'm moved by the fact of when you're treated barbarically, you yourself never become a barbarian. That there was a just trial, that a person was condemned, he received his sentence, and then they quietly and solemnly, under the eyes of a priest, bury this man at sea. And I think there's a dignity to that and a respect that was not afforded to the people who were destroyed. And I think it speaks volumes for the way Israel handled that situation.
So now we're in the theater gallery of the Neuberger Museum of Art here of Purchase College, and there are stills all over the wall. Would you please give us a sense of what these stills are, what they are, and why they move you?
Okay. Well, we really liked arranging videos and stills together and have a nice dialogue between the moving images and the still images, which I think we've achieved. The work behind me is one of the best known images to come out of Israel over the last 10 or 12 years or so, and it's by an artist named Adi Ness. He works in series, and this is part of his Soldiers series, a work done in around the year 2000. And if you look at it, it will certainly evoke something in your mind. You're looking at a group of Israeli soldiers sitting along a table, and one thinks almost immediately of Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper.
Absolutely.
The piece is untitled, but it is often referred to as the Last Supper before going to battle. And we don't know. These soldiers may be going out to battle. Maybe this is their last supper. But this is an artist who has a sense of art history. He often draws on Renaissance art and Baroque art to create his work. He was a soldier himself, so he's talking about his own experience, but also a very distinct perspective because he is a gay artist. And if you look at the work, you can see a certain homoerotic undercurrent in these beautiful young men, the way they're draped over one another. So there's that sense of camaraderie that maybe is a little bit more, but it again shows a different perspective on who serves in the military, and I think is essentially a very, very beautiful and compelling image.
I want you to know, first of all, I could just stare at this picture, I don't know, maybe for hours. Each one of the individuals is an important person to me. And you know, art is so subjective, yes?
Of course.
Okay.
I hope
So
everyone will have their own response to
yes.
it.
I don't see any homoeroticism here. For all I know, they're all gay, but it was not something that jumped out at me. What I see is the bonding of young, in this instance, all men. The Israeli army is made up of men and women.
That's right.
But what we have here is, and it's not 12, it's interesting, the Last Supper, of course, had 12 people in it. This has, I think, 14 or 15. But there is a very interesting quality. And Sloan, I wish you'd come in here and sort of pan face by face. Each one of these soldiers is a separate individual, and yet they have been moved into a group. And I think this is one of the greatest photographs of contemporary Israeli life I have ever seen. And again, I just think it's brilliant that it is, in some way, when people come here, they'll know what I mean. When you walk into this exhibit, this particular photograph almost grabs your attention immediately. It's color, a lot of here, some is black and white, right? Right? It's large, and it is so human. Helene, I just feel it's so human.
Well, I agree with you, and that's a word that's come up throughout this tour, that we're trying to show people's humanity. You have a situation like Israel, which can be very contentious at times and create difficult feelings in people, and I think what this show does is show you the people who are involved, what their lives are about, what their day-to-day is about, what means something to them. Their service in the military, their family, their home, their land. All of these things are very much a part of people's experience. And again, the individual and the specific, this are soldiers in the Israeli army, but again, something very universal. This is experience that a person from any nation might have.
Okay, another photograph. What do we have here?
This is a work by Barry Friedlander, who is the most senior artist in this show and has shown internationally, including at the Museum of Modern Art and many other places. It's a large color photograph, and it's a scene in Nazareth where a group of Israeli police officers are guarding the town of Nazareth at the time of Pope Benedict's visit. So it's very interesting in that you have all three religions that make their home in the Middle East are represented here. You have the Israeli security force, you have an image to the far right of the Pope in blessing with a banner with his image and a prayer, and then you have a quote from the Quran saying, "And whoever seeks a religion other than Islam, it will never be accepted of him, and in the hereafter he will be one of the losers." So he's really captured some of the tensions, shall we say, that exist in Israel today, in an image that I find very, very striking. We're looking at another image by Barry Friedlander. This is an immensely complex image. It's a large panoramic photograph about 8 feet across. And it's a beautiful, crisp color image. And when you look at it at first, it looks seamless. It looks as if it's one image. But in fact, that's not the case. It has been digitally manipulated. So there are perhaps tens, if not hundreds, of images that have been digitally stitched together to create one scene. There's way too much information in it. You couldn't possibly get it in a single shot. And if you look closely, you will see some figures repeated again and again and again. He's commenting on the politics of the day. What this image is the evacuation of Israeli settlers from the Gaza Strip in, I believe, 2005. So it's an image that most people would have seen on their television screens at night, but interpreted by this very interesting artist in a complex way.
So what do we have here?
We have 3 photographs by an artist named Sharon Yari, and these are all taken in Tel Aviv. And we have a large black and white image. You look at it, it looks slightly blurry to you. That's absolutely intentional. And you see a street, it's called Rashi Street. And it looks like something is happening. You see a dust cloud rolling down the street, and you don't know what it is. It's meant to be ambiguous. Is this a dust storm? Is this construction? Is this a terrorist attack? So the artist is very much about the ambiguity of this scene.
A great photograph, don't you think? A great photograph.
He is very subtle and very good.
In contrast, this picture is very sharp and vivid.
Mm-hmm.
Again, black and white. Talk about it for a moment.
Again, by Sharon Yari, this one is called Tel Aviv, and you see a group of people, a small group of people on a rooftop in Tel Aviv. And I think what he's talking about here is this juxtaposition. On the one sense, you have these really modern office towers that could be anywhere in the world, imposed on the older parts of the city. And he talks about this mix of East and West and what it means to impose an advanced Western culture in one of the oldest places in the world, in the middle of the Middle East, and how that's can be a strange juxtaposition. This is interesting too. That is a prison tower, a concrete prison tower, and these are the 2 soldiers that are guarding it. It seems like a fairly rundown place. But one of the things that's beautiful about it is the images suggest a romantic painting, men on horseback, and that lovely imagery. So again, you have the juxtaposition of a rather romantic image with a rather stark and bleak one.
And again, we've said this before, all art is subjective. I love this photograph, and it's interesting. You know, I know from my own experience, there are places in Connecticut where I live that look exactly like this. Mm-hmm. And here we have 2 Israeli soldiers, both on horses, and there's a quiet moment between them. And I don't know if you have a sense of this. I have a feeling it's a very peaceful picture. Is it peaceful for you?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is a peaceful moment.
And it's interesting, it's peaceful even though it's in the background of a watchtower. You tell me it's a prison. If it's a prison watchtower, it's a prison watchtower. It's interesting, there's no guard up in the watchtower. But for me, whether it's a watchtower, whether it's some tower that separates the West Bank from Israel proper, and it is some kind of guard station for security, it didn't matter to me. As I saw this picture, I said to myself, the whole tableau is one where, lo and behold, even in the midst, the shadow of the tower, you have people who are just talking together. There's no conflict here. There's no action here. And for me, it was a very peaceful picture.
Peaceful, and as you're talking about it, it strikes me as a rather intimate moment.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
it's quiet and intimate moment.
Yes, that's a better word. Intimate. So Elaine, you've chosen this exhibit right now as the last moment to show us. Tell us why.
This is a video by an artist named Ori Gerst, and it again is a quite well-known image. What he's done, it is a video, but it looks exactly like an 18th century still life painting, which is what it's modeled on. And he suspended the fruit in space, and you're watching it for a while. It seems still, quiet, and quite peaceful, but then something happens. And I don't want to tell you what happens until you see it, because it will take you by surprise.
We'll watch.
Okay. So as you're watching this still life, which looks completely still, a bullet shoots across the screen and shoots through the pomegranate, which is a fruit that's associated with Israel, and it bursts into bits. So the artist is quite a poetic person. He is not making an overt statement about violence, but he's making a statement about violence, whether he's referring to the French Revolution, which he has, whether it's to life in Israel today, but a moment of quiet and repose and stillness that is shattered suddenly by violence. So we're thinking about war, terrorism, and things of that nature.
Helene, I can't thank you enough for taking us around. And by the way, in Hebrew, the word for excellent is mitsuyan. And I say to my kids, and whenever people do something wonderful, mitsuyan, mitsuyan, mitsuyan. It's a triple mitsuyan to you. And I've been trying to formulate one question for you. And in some way, it's not fair. I'm telling you that ahead of time. It's not fair.
Okay.
But you'll do the best you can with it, and we'll see where it goes. There is so much being said about Israel today. And again, we began with the word complex. There's a complexity to Israel. And, you know, this is Shalom TV. The people who are watching us right now overwhelmingly support the state of Israel, believe in the state of Israel. I hope they are sophisticated enough to understand that Israel deals with many, many complex, difficult questions. Life is not easy. You know, we started at one point and you showed us the video of all of the Palestinians going through a checkpoint. And I think the word you used is a word that I hear often. There's a sense of, isn't it too bad, almost like an indignity, that these people who are coming to work in Israel have to go through a checkpoint. At the same time, there would be no checkpoint if there was within the Palestinian world an uprising that says, we will not allow Hamas, we will not allow Hezbollah, we will not allow the history of people who come in and slit the throat of 3-year-old children as they're sleeping, as they did in Itamar. If there was no security issue, there would be no checkpoint. And the Israelis I speak to are as saddened by the reality they live in, and they would just as soon have what we had prior to 67, prior to 73. They just, people getting back and forth across the border. And the point I want to make to you is that as I see so much here that really touches me, I am concerned that there is something missing, and I want you to speak to that. And I asked Helen about this as well. You know, why did you label this exhibit the compromised land? And it does make a political statement. So what's missing for me is a video or a photograph of an Israeli soldier carrying a Palestinian child or adult who has come to a checkpoint because he knows that if he collapses at that checkpoint, he'll be taken to an Israeli hospital where he'll be treated exactly the same as any Israeli citizen and be given care and comfort and healing that he knows he cannot find anywhere in the Palestinian world, anywhere. Or we have not seen the Israeli people who are going out of their way every chance they can to address some of the issues of what you and I would call injustice. How appreciative they are that they have not yet reached that ideal utopia that we spoke about at the very beginning of the exhibit, and that the compassion of the state of Israel is not on display here. What is on display is sort of like a needling criticism of Israel. And I wanted you to speak about that and tell me whether, number one, you think I missed the message. And I understand there is we talked about there is an agenda here, but I want there to be, in any exhibit, a range where people come in, learn more about Israel, in some way feel touched, and at the same time walk away also with a sense of, what Israel has done under impossible circumstances is just humanly amazing and maybe unique in the annals of all human history. And so if there's anything that I feel is missing, I wish there was more of that. And it's interesting, the video we saw that dealt with how they buried Eichmann and the comments you made and how it reflected for you sort of the best of Jewish and the state of Israel. That to me is what I wish there was a little bit more of. And again, it's not a fair question, but I didn't want this program to end without you having a chance to sort of speak to it.
Well, it's a complicated statement, but I'll try to address it. Yes, there's a certain critique of Israel. I would not say a needling criticism. It's not a criticism. The artists are very proud to be Israelis and very proud of their country. I think you'll find with most contemporary artists that there's a tendency to form a critique.
Yes.
That they're not simply doing PR for their country. They're not cheerleaders for their country. They're bringing their own experience, their education, their intelligence, and looking at a situation and saying, this is my country, I love it, the way we Americans would say, this is my country, I love it. But it's an open democracy, and I have the right to critique
Absolutely.
it as I see fit. I think the show doesn't have one particular agenda. It's not meant to be a criticism of Israel by any measure. I think it's meant to show Israel in its complexity, insofar as you can with the work of 20 artists. It's meant to show the humanity of all of the people who are involved in the situation, and for us, and to, in some cases, to provoke us, to make us look at some of our received notions and think about how we might look at the situation differently. But I think we can't be afraid of an open debate. I think that's an extremely important thing living in the contemporary world, looking at contemporary art, that this is our moment and that we weigh in, the artists weigh in. We as curators have decided that these artists have something important enough to say that we want to put on display, that we've written about it, that we have a catalog that describes the work for people, and that we thought Israel was important. And that is part of the reason we did the show, because Israel is important in the political world and the political dialogue, that the artists working there are very sophisticated and need to be more in an international sphere. So it's all of those things. I hope that answers your question.
First of all, you do fabulous work.
Thank you.
I congratulate you.
Thank you.
I wish you continued success. Not only, again, the Neuberger Museum of Art of Purchase College does not only do Jewish themes or Israel.
That's right.
You are doing extraordinary work. You're putting together exhibit after exhibit. So I wish you every success.
Thank
It has been so gracious of you to give me this kind of time. And what I really hope happens now is that many of the people who are watching on Shalom TV have a chance to see this. But there's a book you put out.
We have a catalog called The Compromised Land, recent photography and video from Israel that people can purchase at the museum.
So do yourselves a favor if you can get over to the Neuberger Museum of Purchase College here at Purchase College. Before this exhibit ends, which ends December 1st, you'll have an amazing experience. And I hope that if you are here, you'll then be in touch with me and let me know your own thoughts to an extraordinary exhibit put together in part by Helene Posner and by Lily Way and the extraordinary people who are here at the Neuberger Museum of Purchase College. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mark.
Be well, my friends.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM. To GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.